Deepak Gupta sir, thank you so much for giving this opportunity. Welcome to Jar Xchange.
My pleasure, my pleasure. I've seen your episodes, some very interesting personalities, and it's very free-flowing, and it's been fun to see them. So yeah,
Thanks, sir.
I'm more than happy to be here.
And we are in Bombay.
Yes.
And तो सर just for people who do not know, एक बारी आपकी introduction से शुरू करेंगे. I have read a lot about you.
So we are in Bombay. I grew up here when it was known as Bombay,
हाँ जी.
and sometimes I still use that name. All my college was here. I was in IIT Bombay for engineering, and then I went overseas, took a bit of a right-hand turn into finance economics, and then I came back to India in '97. That time, I began to believe that India would be shining. And this is before a lot of people talked about it. And then I've had stints in a few companies. I think longer one was in Intel. It was for maybe 14 years.
Sir, IIT कैसा था 1990s?
IIT Bombay, yes. IIT 1990. So for me, I think it was fun. It was, you learn a lot without realizing it at the moment. And it has given me, of course, lifelong friends. It taught me what I liked and I didn't like. At that time, this is very different from the IIT of today. I think a lot of us did want to go overseas, mainly to the US and things, to see what's out there, study a bit. I think the opportunity set in India was still growing. It was not what it is today. There was nothing called a startup. So it was very different. I was blessed because I also had friends in South Bombay and things. So it was like I had the IIT experience and the non-IIT experience all together. So
उस टाइम पे IIT में 1993.
1993, I finished my course, yes.
उस टाइम पे IIT बॉम्बे में क्या एग्जिट सैलरीज होती हो?
So I think, yeah, between 10 and 20,000, maybe 14, 15,000 was considered a pretty good job. I think there were some of them were even lower, maybe 7 to 10,000. At the same time, I don't think there were a lot of opportunities. Like it was not like if you see now all these consulting companies, Google, everything. There was nothing of that sort. I think the one or two more premium employers were like Citicorp and things like that, affiliates of Citibank. So a lot of people were anyway going overseas. So this was obviously important, but they were like, "Kaun se university mein ja raha hai?" Those were the questions. So my first salary was actually I was doing an internship in the US. I don't remember exactly, but it was maybe mid $40,000 a year, something. So that was my first salary then.
इंटेल पे आता है सर, इंटेल के बारे में.
So Intel, I joined, in 2000. I moved to Bangalore. So that was a major city change, and I love the city. I stayed there for 8 years. I worked in several parts of Intel, mainly in treasury, finance, and some of the investments part. I also had regional roles, India and then Asia in treasury and finance. So it was fun. I think what I recall about Intel, which I still apply today, I think is the culture. You know, Intel was one of the pioneers of the so-called Silicon Valley culture. So Hewlett Packard, Intel was some of those. So those more free debate, more egalitarian, first principles. So those are some of the things I think have stayed with me. And of course, it was fun. And I learned a lot in various areas. And then around 2015 or so, I got directly into early stage. And then soon after, around 2017, I started WEH Ventures basically. And then that's what I've been doing.
So okay, talk us about WEH Ventures.
No, so WEH is a very simple philosophy of just backing founders, focusing on India with solutions which cater to India and then might go global. I started this with Rohit Krishna many years ago, and we do pre-seed, seed across sectors, fintech, content, consumer, B2B. And I think over time we've developed our own little style. We have some reputation. We are surrounded by some very smart founders. And it's fun, right? Seeing all the sectors, all the dynamic Indian sort of stories, finding ourselves wrong a lot, right, sometimes. So it's fun. And we're a very small team, so it really works well in terms of learning. For the seniors learn from the juniors learn from the seniors. We are spread across Mumbai and Bangalore. So yeah, I mean, I think venture is a fun game, though at times it can be difficult in terms of long periods of dry spells. Suddenly things happen. So one has to appreciate those aspects, just like like a mirror image of a founder's journey, but maybe not as intense sometimes. Yeah.
First investment yaad hai sir?
Yes. First investment from WEH Ventures is a well-known company called Pratilipi.
Oh, okay.
This is one of the early pioneers in vernacular content. They started 2014. In fact, 2 hours ago, I just met Ranjit, who's the CEO.
Is he here?
Few floors up. So I think it's a phenomenal company in the sense that they have created this whole engine of authors and stories in our vernacular languages, and those guys are now finding monetization. Screen time, many stories have made it to various sizes of screens, and of course since then many the whole content game is picked.
चलो सर मैं आपको उनकी पॉडकास्ट भेजूंगा.
Yeah, sure.
ठीक है सर, स्टार्टअप की दुनिया में आते हैं एंड दीज आर सम पॉपुलर नैरेटिव्स दैट आई वांट टू टॉक अबाउट जिनकी बातें होती हैं. सो वन थिंग इज अबाउट वैल्यूएशन. तो वी हियर दिस ओवर द रोफ लाइक अनबिलीवेबल नंबर्स ऑफ कंपनीज. तो आपका क्या पर्सपेक्टिव है इसमें कि व्हाई इज दिस वैल्यूएशन इम्पॉर्टेंट? डू यू थिंक कि हम इसको ओवर एम्फसाइज करते हैं? एंड ऑल्सो डू यू थिंक फाउंडर्स आर बिल्डिंग फॉर वैल्यूएशंस मोर देन प्रॉफिट्स?
Yeah, I think valuation is of course important. Valuation is a corollary of dilution. कि how much means आपको कितने percentage देनी पड़ेगी to get certain amount of money. And then ultimately कितने पैसे से आप कहीं पहुँचोगे. Right? That is the equation. So valuation is basically summarizing that. And valuation happens many times. You know, पहले ज़माने में होता था when there was no series A, B, C, D. Startups used to raise 1 round, 2 round. They were already having a monetization model and they'll go to IPO. Abhi to Seed A, if you see some other companies raise series J and K. So that's a different game. So yes, founders are building for valuation, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that to the extent that they are also understanding their goals to build a business which can take a lot of market share in a particular industry. So to that extent, valuation is important because they have to dilute and then their end outcome is dependent on these things. I think the issue is that the market itself, by its nature, is up and down. Some year the valuations are high, some year they're low. So you have to play it over a period of time. And if you have raised money at a very high valuation and before you found any kind of business model, then it becomes a problem because either you don't find the business model or you find it and you have to grow the numbers to that valuation. Otherwise, you have to do a down round and that has its own complications. So the challenge comes that if you are overvalued today relative to what you will be 2 years if the market is soft and you can't execute to that, then companies will have problems, which we are seeing for the last year or so. So that's what it is. So there's nothing wrong with keeping valuation in mind, but founders will ultimately win on their mission and their understanding and execution. And if they don't do that, then anyway the companies will not be very successful. So then they won't have the outcome that they're seeking.
Sir, for a layman, कुछ thumb rule होता है क्या valuation का? How अगर हम कुछ industry ले या कुछ भी ले, किस तरीके से valuations decide करते हैं?
नहीं, one of them is of course जैसे there's a sales multiple because companies do not have profit. So if you see, nowadays VCs are investing in a lot of brands. So if you see even slow growing but large companies like HUL and all, Hindustan, Unilever, depending on, I've not seen the latest numbers, but somewhere 8 to 10 times sales is their multiple. So a lot of brands have been, and many others are sort of similar range. So a lot of consumer brand companies also command that. That becomes a benchmark. Like there was this acquisition of this Ching's brand recently by Tata. That brand was not growing as fast, but is a market leader. So that sold for something like 6.5 times like sales. So those are well established in certain industries. Like SaaS has always had some multiples, give or take. I think now they've crashed by more than half in the last 2 years. So, earlier there used to be maybe 15, 18 times sales or something for better companies. So every industry has that. So that becomes a benchmark. Obviously, at the very early stage, when they have no revenue, then it is just a matter of how much can I raise, whether it is 500,000, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, without diluting too much. You don't want to dilute 35% in the first round. And what can I achieve with that to get to the next milestone, which will be determined by sort of market multiple. So that's the way it works. So yeah, there are benchmarks for companies which have some revenue or some scale.
But otherwise, there is no thumb rule, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, thumb rule to kuch nahi hai. I mean, for us, I mean, for VCs, it used to be still is, in your early stage, you say, okay, I'm coming in now. For the next round, how much will be the, what is called a step up, the increase in valuation. I think in the bull market, from seed to Series A used to be 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. But in this market, it's much less. Maybe it's 1.5 times, 2 times. So it changes by the market. But you try to seek, okay, can I get in at a good valuation so that if it actually performs, then the next round can be at a decent, I get some appreciation for the risk that I take.
So in this market, you mean funding winter?
Winter, you can call it winter. I think, so obviously it's much lower than, I think it's a 5-year low in terms of dollars. But I think if you see, I think I wrote an article on this also some time back. If you see the question is whether our market can absorb 10 billion or 40 billion of venture capital a year. My sense, it is closer to 10 than to 40. Because our exits and M&A markets will take some time to develop. So somewhere, I think last year we were somewhere between 7 and 10 billion, which has its own implication in terms of the volume of exits we get. So it is a winter relative to the summer we had in 2020 and 21, but that was somewhat of an aberration from a historical perspective globally due to the COVID and zero interest and all that. So yeah, I think we're still recovering from it. We have some good news and some IPOs coming. Indian economy is sort of going well. There's some expectation of interest rate reduction globally. So I think 24 should be better. But we're still working through some of those overvalued companies and things like that at all levels. So
are there any markers for VCs to understand कि funding winter आने वाला है?
No.
या फिर ये सिर्फ
No, if you see, actually, forget VCs. See, there's a fundamental notion. If you see the calls by Wall Street analysts, if you see the calls by consultants on any matter, they're more wrong than right. So the ability to predict the future itself is inherently very weak. If you see what happened during COVID, in that early 2020, for the first month, all the VC action stopped because all hell had broken loose. And then all the VCs, I think, basically assumed that, there'll be a winter. But then by April, May, deals were being done at Zoom in 2 weeks. So did any VC even know? I think some of them even wrote great memos saying, tighten your belts. But those memos turned out to be absolutely wrong. And then after COVID hit, a lot of those companies got huge valuations because their trajectories were as per COVID. But then those tapered off because that COVID effect wore off. So then again, we are wrong. So I think VCs are also humans. And I don't think they're any better predictors than anybody else. So nobody knew. I don't think recessions can easily be predicted in general. If you see the history, it's very hard to predict until it happens. The Great American Depression of the late 1920s also, I think there are some stories that even 3-4 years in, like people didn't realize how deep it is. This predictability is a very weak thing actually, in general, on most events.
So, how do things change in this market? We go towards more of revenue making or profit making and all of that.
So what happens is if the funding market is weak, or rather when it is strong, typically zero interest, there's a lot of money in the market. So you will get money to have a longer rope, which means to find your business model, to find monetization, find your first gross margin and then the contribution margin. When that leeway reduces, then you are asked to show those things much earlier in your journey or much more sooner. So yeah, to the extent that the funding market is tight, the VCs are asking PE type questions. What is your EBITDA, etc., rather than grow at all costs. So that is what is happening, and to the extent the market loosens, it may change. At early stage, it may be still slightly different. I think people are still willing to make bets at seed and those kind of things. So, but very soon at Series A, they may start asking the same questions. So that's the nature of the market. It's just the VC behavior is driven by the condition of the market, which fluctuates, which is true of economic cycles also. In technology, that is much more accentuated. Technology companies have more volatility, fundamentally. So traditionally, they used to get a lower multiple, like semiconductor companies. But I think obviously the bull market decided getting high multiples too. But that's what it is.
So loss-making companies, startups की बात करते हैं. मतलब I have some data from Inc42 that 55 out of 74 unicorns are loss-making. Operating loss in excess of $6 billion. तो इस पे आपका क्या कहना है सर?
See, we are looking at them in the rearview mirror. When they were funded, maybe in the 2021, the line that was extrapolated was, "Ki boss, just take this money, just capture the market. We are here for you. Next round be 6 minutes." When unicorns were raising around in six months. So they've built to that trajectory. Suddenly that funding vanished and you have to change gears. So I think the question is not how many of them were unprofitable 1.5 years ago. The question is, where are they now? Are they converging? And can they manage without any material funding? If they can, and the other challenge is if you can do it but you have no growth, then also you are actually in a trouble spot. You have to grow also, because ultimately if you stall at whatever $50 million revenue and you have some break even, then also nobody will fund you. So can you deliver both? That's very tough to do. So I would imagine maybe half of them may do it. A lot of them may have got money without having any kind of proof point or to justify that kind of money.
In a bull cycle.
Yes. What happens, your guardrails change. You get money before what is called product market fit or whatever. That is very hard, because as a unicorn, you can't pivot. You have like 500 people. You can do it, but I'm saying it's much easier to do when you're 20 people. So many of them may not make it. That's a fact. It's already happening in the US, so many shutdowns. India, I think, is a little behind with that. So we'll also see that.
तो सर, बट इज इट ओके, मतलब इसको कैसे समझाया जाए कि 10-10 साल तक लॉस मेकिंग कंपनीज हैं, तो एक पॉइंट तो आएगा जहाँ पे we'll have to start looking at profitability and actual business.
Yes, I mean, I agree 10 years is not a short amount of time, but see, it depends, like on a SaaS business or something. Traditionally they would spend 30 to 40% of the revenue on sales and marketing. So to the extent that they are making money of their existing customers and are growing, as long as all parties understand that, it's fine, right? It's not only about EBITDA, कि भाई EBITDA clearly होना चाहिए, because growth, I said, is also important. So quality of growth, if they have some lifetime value, which you can understand, every new dollar of sales, you can get $3 of gross margin. If that is established, they can keep raising or keep growing, raising some money. But you're right, I think 10 years is a long time. But, I mean, it takes 10 years to build a sizable business in anything. So I think it's more about the convergence. Can you converge a lot in 5 years? Can you show unit? If you are a multi-city company, can you show in your older cities that you're making good money and then you keep expanding, right? Those kind of things matter. So I think the second order thing is also important. But yes, I think in today's market, a 10-year-old company, fundamentally people expect it to be profitable. That's true.
Sir, unicorn status ki kya value? Is it just a number?
No, I think it is no longer. In fact, it's a black mark today. Because what happens is, if you say you're a unicorn, then there's a certain expectation of where you are in your business journey. And if you really not reached anywhere, then it's a burden on your neck. Because how will you, then if you raise money at $300 million, it becomes very painful capital restructuring and all that. So how are you going to do that, right? So I think it's no longer what it was. If you know the word unicorn itself, when it was coined, unicorn is actually a rare animal. So I think the person who coined it probably felt it's a rarity. And suddenly we had 100 in India and maybe 700 in the world in just the next 7-8 years. So itself became not so coveted in some sense, right? Became sort of common.
But it's a title. Does it?
It's not a title. I mean, it basically meant a private company which is worth $1 billion or more. This was one word to describe that. So you can call it whatever. It's like a definition. It's a word which has a meaning. But now it doesn't mean anything. Because are you selling? Is there stock worth $1 billion today is a question. I don't know if today's founders should think about unicorn as such. And there's other threads, right, that you can maybe go IPO at unicorn or minus unicorn valuation. More and more companies are coming to India or flipping back to India because our capital markets are accepting them more than in the US for those kind of models, giving them rich valuations. So I think it's more about your, when you get to an exit, M&A or IPO, rather than just you're sitting unicorn for 20 years is a problem.
Sir, VC ecosystem में कुछ एक दो problems की बात कर. जब startup pitches की बात होती है and when we meet founders or we read on Twitter, तो काफ़ी threads आती हैं about comparison of Indian VCs with US VCs. उसमें one of the things is कि response नहीं आता. If it's a no, तो वो no नहीं बोला जाता. क्या आपको ऐसा लगता है कि ऐसी problem है?
Yeah, I'm sure होगी. I think मुझे लग रहा है, I mean, culturally, I think maybe US VCs probably take more effort to respond no. So to that extent, it is probably true. But I think at the same time, founders should sort of know how to deal with it. Because I think there are some statistics that show to raise a Series A round, you have to talk to 30 to 50 investors. So उसमें से maybe 90% are not interested. But will you get a response from 90%? Maybe 70% of those 90% will tell you. But you need to keep moving on, right? So I think that's fine. But I don't see why it should stall a founder's efforts, or maybe they need plan B, figure out, raise from somebody else or pivot or whatever it is, right? There is an internal round. So, I mean, it is what it is. We are also comparing, Indian VCs are giving US valuations for a time which is much smaller. Right? We are guilty of that. Our times are not going to be in the hundreds of billions of dollars for most things, or tens of billions, right? But we give the valuation. So you enjoy that also, right? It's the flip side.
ठीक है. दूसरा क्रिटिसिज्म आता है सर कि जब पिच करते हैं VCs को, तो द फर्स्ट पॉइंट ऑफ कॉन्टैक्ट इज जनरली एन एनालिस्ट. तो बहुत सारे मैंने ये थ्रेड्स पढ़े हैं और जितनी मेरी बात भी होती है फाउंडर से, कि ये एक फीलिंग आती है कि दे आर नॉट द राइट पर्सन टू जज, कि हम कुछ बता रहे हैं एंड इज ही द राइट पर्सन टू जज, एंड ही इज़ द फर्स्ट लेयर बिटवीन यू एंड द फाउंडर. तो अगर वहाँ पे ही देयर आर सो मेनी थ्रेड्स ऑन ट्विटर, आई एम श्योर आपको ये आता होगा. तो what do you see this? How does a founder reach you directly, or is it not a right expectation? या फिर इसमें कुछ is there merit?
So I'll tell you personally, we also get a fair hundreds of companies probably every month. But if somebody writes to me directly, I do not ignore it. So I think what happens is, I'll tell you a very basic thing. If you are a founder, you're writing to me or any other partner, you have an email. If you found out my email address, not very hard to find. So there's a text of the email and there's an attachment. I think there are ways to write those 5 lines very well. Most people don't get it. Many of them I read, I don't even understand what business they're in, and they have written 4 paragraphs. You have to build excitement. So first you have to tell me what to do. Second, you have to tell me what is so great about what you are doing in this business. Third, you have to tell me what is so great about you in terms of how it relates to this business. Right? These are the 3 or 4 things. It can be written in 5 or 6 lines. But I think we are poor at communication. And not just this, I have also seen that the difference between founders who get funded and not, ceteris paribus, everything being equal, is this.
Pitching.
And this, not just pitching, this articulation and everything that you communicate. And this is a lifelong delta between these. If you see the trajectory of 2 companies, 2 guys from the same college who are equally capable otherwise, one may be more articulate than the other. You look back 10 years, the articulate guy will be 5 steps ahead of this guy. It's an endemic flaw. So founders should be aware of this and work on it. What are you saying? In 20 seconds, can you capture the attention of somebody? The other is, of course, the common remedy is to reach out to, be smart, map out the LinkedIn, reach out to founders who this VC knows or has invested in. Because then for sure you will be considered more seriously, right? Because see, for the most part, no VC is only interested in one sector. A lot of times you may not have a thesis about exactly what you're doing. And the most interesting companies actually don't fit into any thesis. Airbnb was not in anybody's thesis. So therefore, they are agnostic. मुझे फर्क नहीं पड़ता मैं इस सेक्टर में करूँ, इस सेक्टर अलग में 5 सेक्टर में कर रहा हूँ, कोई फर्क नहीं. So your pitch is competing with so many others or the next, and it's all, so you have to figure out a way to break out. Don't like that list.
So VC के in touch आ भी नहीं सकता. The problem is that जो popular thing which I'm reading on Twitter is कि जो layer है analysts की, तो ये feeling आती है कि यार इसने थोड़ी कुछ बनाया है. Who is he to judge, right? तो ये feeling.
No, you are right. तो क्या करे? तो फिर see, the larger VCs have armies, and their analysts are divided by sectors. It's their job to cover every deal in the sector. I think partners will give you time. So what you have to do then is you have to create a bit of a persona on social media. Beyond this, they say content marketing. So that when you write to the partner or also write to the analyst, there is some resonance. But this is a fact. And how many you see, I think any VC, they've probably fund less than 1% of the deals that come to them. Sometimes half or even less than that percent. But those are the odds. So what are you going to do? It's like cat train going to the top IIMs, right? 99.8 percentile or whatever. So you have to be in that.
So but then does IIT IIM help in the sense कि आपका क्या thesis है इसके ऊपर?
No.
Well, if you look at the data,
yeah, of course, a lot of them are from IIT. Some, of course, much more than IIMs, but IIMs have a smaller population also. I think it helps because what happens is you see, one of the things for first-time founders is where do they learn from? How do you learn how to pitch? How do you get the market intelligence? How do you approach a VC? So the IITs obviously have that network. And the lesser known colleges do not. They're building. Similarly, some of the stronger IIMs may have those networks. So that is the advantage you get. Not because you are brilliant, but because you get the network. Right? And therefore you are able to land yourself in for hiring and other things. Right? So you have that slight unfair advantage is what I would say. Not because they're inherently superior. So to that extent, they succeed. Of course, some of them may have that additional capability. But I think this is the more important factor.
So rise and fall of poster childs की बात करते हैं. There are so many companies that we see in the last few years जो एकदम shot up. They've done good. But for some reason or the other, they've come crashing down also, right? That's the flip side of a startup, a high growth phase startup. जैसे हीरो बनता है कोई
Time magazine.
टाइम वैसे ही like everything goes wrong with that, or beat the founder or the company, the culture.
30 under 30.
And then exit भी वैसे ही हो. So I want to understand, sir, media जो भी बोले, and I'm not saying कि we have to criticize the founder or a company, but look at what is coming in the media about Byju's. Now there is fintech which is closing now. So many stories are coming in the last few years. So how does a investor look at it? Or if you want to talk about some stories.
Yeah. So 2-3 things. So you're right. I think this media hype is a cycle across industries. Like I was saying earlier, the tech industry has its own gyrations, which are much more than other industries. I think people like Elizabeth Holmes have been on the cover of Time magazine and all. So yeah, somehow you reach your zenith and then sort of you come down, right? So I think to some extent this will keep happening. Okay. And so it's not something that we should be surprised ki ho raha hai. Because
they're also building in public, right? In the sense,
it's not building in public because they get covered. Because what happens is as companies get a lot of funding, they get more and more media attention. And a lot of times people are not questioning, perhaps even in the media, what is the fundamental business model. And then as they get the funding, the business rubber band gets stretched, and then it kind of breaks. And then people say, oh, this company is not good and all. But I think that you can say whatever. I think first of all, even as a VC or as a media person, you know, the bolte na man in the arena. So founders do very difficult things. So it's very easy to criticize X and Y. But I'll tell you, for example, about the edtech sector. So we've actually not yet taken an exposure. And from our perspective, there's a reason. Because we did companies like Pratilipi and others in content and other things. And when we started looking at edtech 4-5 years ago, we had those benchmarks of those companies. You know, we said, what are the network effects? What is the retention? What is the engagement? And somehow that was not the conversation these companies presented in any meaningful way. That was not their internal KPI. It was more sales and increase the ticket size and sort of became a push product. And not any one company, I think the larger segment. And then if you ask around, like I would ask my friends, children and all who are all in this 8 to 12, like, you bought X company's package. Is he using it? There's no answer. So if so much money has been invested and the product is not being used, then if you go to the classic definition of product market fit, it breaks down. So you should have achieved that when you were valued at 20 billion or 50 million. And maybe they did. But then they changed the business model, right? So then we said, at least for us, we don't understand it. Maybe we miss this sector or whatever, but we try to at least have some conviction or confidence when we pursue an opportunity. A lot of time, later on, we are also wrong. It's not that we know, but if we can't make any sense of it, then we don't. So we sort of avoided that sector. And now maybe it's easy for us to say that, but I'm just saying this is how we thought about it. So I think the issue is because certain companies became very, very valuable. So obviously they will draw a lot of attention. But yeah, I think their business model got very stretched and then it broke. So then it's more difficult for them. So, I mean, that will keep happening to some degree, but because of the zero interest rate phenomenon and all, that the vertical velocity of that climb was very steep. And the steeper you climb sometimes, then the fall is also steep, right? If you see other companies like, say, Zomato or others, they've also had their challenges, questions. But they sort of ridden through it. And look at them now, they're performing so well. And the market has accepted it, right? So there are yo-yos everywhere, but when it's very steep, then it gets very dangerous. So that's what it is. But ultimately, if you think about the venture industry, they make money only from these yo-yos. The periods of time when they actually cash out are only a fraction of the total sort of array of time, right? So that's the game, right?
The crypto भी game ही था क्या? फिर मैं because I'm in a fintech, I'm not related to crypto at all, but because I'm in a fintech, मैं जाता था अपने होम टाउन तो लोग बोलते थे कि यार इस पे इन्वेस्ट करें, इस पे इन्वेस्ट करें, और मैं बोलता मुझे समझ नहीं आ रहा है आपके से, एंड आज कोई नहीं पूछ रहा है, like the amount of ads that has happened on TV and everywhere, and so what are your thoughts?
So it's crypto also, for example, we sat out of it because it was not clear to us in most of it, especially the currencies, why they should increase or decrease. There are other factors too. I think as it is coming out now, this whole anti-money laundering legislation, which has brought down some of the big exchanges in the US and all, because the SEC and the regulators have decided that they were falling afoul of those regulations. So there were all those risks. So the value is coming from skirting regulation, that's also a problem. But again, हमें भी समझ में नहीं आया कि भाई ये क्यों बढ़ेगा, कितना बढ़ेगा, what is the fundamental value creation. I'm sure there is value in crypto, in infra and other layers, because if something is going to become big, then there is a full stack supporting it. So it's not that there is no value, but to a large extent we didn't quite get it. Of course, now in India to hold it is not easy. People are doing it through VPNs and all, and there are tax and other issues. So if you have to pay a lot of tax and stuff, then would the gains even make sense? So there are all other issues also. So yeah, but it's the same thing. I think
mis-selling हुई थी फिर?
No, mis-selling too, yes. I mean, obviously the some of the ads were very provocative. They had celebrities. I think they had a big effect on people. Again, I don't blame the companies. I think now since then SEBI and others have tightened the ad codes. So see, it is the duty of companies to use the regulation to its maximum. They're not sadhus. They're in business. So there's nothing wrong with that. Those who are putting in money should realize. I've heard of some people who put a lot of their retirement money into that. Now they should have realized, why are you being so greedy? Would you put all your money in one stock if you're retiring? Even if it is, blue chip like Reliance, you shouldn't. So basic things. So, I mean, I don't blame the companies. Again, it is individual's choice, right? And some people have made money also, those who got in early. So, again, an asset has its own, it's a different asset class. So, you should play it to the extent that you understand it and you can take the risk. If you can't, then you will suffer.
ठीक है सर, अभी हम सेक्टर्स की बात कर रहे हैं, तो you say that WEH is sector agnostic. But what sectors do you think are the upcoming sectors आगे जाके? या आपकी मतलब you are looking for something?
No, I don't. I mean, obviously, tactically, things, if you see what is happening to India, obviously there's been a travel boom, a lot of companies. India is getting older. There's something there or not. We will consume more and more aspirational brands and services. For example, we recently invested in a company called Game Theory, which provides you a superior experience to play badminton and technology to actually rate your game and coach. So what's going to happen is at a very high level, the theme is that if India is going to grow at a certain rate, what will India consume, right? We will begin to consume more services. Every advanced economy has a lot of services consumption. If you go to a Walmart store in the US, you see the sections devoted to hunting and fishing and shotguns. Why is Decathlon successful?
Yeah.
Right? So 3,000 crore business out of. So the consumption theme is very interesting. Then, of course, this whole digital infrastructure keeps on giving us new things. UPI, then UPI AutoPay, which you've seen in some of our companies and things like that. UPI Lite, now ONDC, OSEN is coming up. So it's a gift that keeps on giving, like an Akshay Patra, right? Every year there is something new. And that is really, the usefulness of that is that it makes new business models possible because it collapses the cost of doing business in certain ways and trust. So that will keep on giving. So that's another theme. Then if you see the digitization of India on the enterprise side, so various sectors are at various levels of digitization. You know, how much of the GDP of that sector is driven by digitization and how much of that is India's GDP. So construction, for example, has less. Fintech has a bit more. Logistics has some. So you can look at each of them and come up with certain things. Then there are these horizontals like some AI and things like that which have just come. I think we've done something in that. Nobody knows exactly where this will go, but obviously there is some value creation happening. So we keep playing all these themes. And we have some thesis in certain areas, but a lot of times, like we were discussing earlier, the founders, or invariably, the founders have to have this compelling insight into an area which may have existed before. See, everything is not some brand new going to Mars kind of thing, but just a new take on something which can change that sector. If they can show it, then we sort of go for it, right? Insurance is changing a lot. Health insurance, cyber insurance. So there are many, many things that keep happening in India. So we do not want to hang our hat on one sector and say कि ये 5 साल खेलेंगे, because things keep changing.
सर अब इसकी बात कर रहे हैं तो अब आपने UPI unravel की बात करी, भारत स्टैक की बात करते हैं सर. ये जस्ट लेट्स, बहुत सारा आता है इंडिया स्टैक, भारत स्टैक, लेट्स जस्ट गो इनटू इट. ये है क्या और इससे हो क्या रहा है?
No, I think this is a fundamental digital infra, starting with your basic identity of Aadhaar, then KYC, then your ability for your banks to get instant payment, then some other layers on top like account aggregator and all to get information to underwrite you. Then it's going on to insurance with the health records. So it's a full digital infrastructure to identify you uniquely, cover all your financial needs, so that allow you to interface with all kinds of intermediaries, and of course now mutually, like peer-to-peer. So this is like an envelope which is not necessarily created entirely by the government, but by bodies started by the government and then embraced by the government and accelerated with other organizations, iSpirit, etc. A lot of evangelization. So this has now become a force of nature, and it has done many things. I think the very first instance of it was the direct subsidy payment. So there used to be a joke. Out of every 1 rupee that the government gives as subsidy, only 25% reaches the end consumer. But due to this direct benefit schemes, a lot of the leakage has essentially gone, or almost all of it.
Was it a joke?
No, it was not a joke. It was, the percentage may be off, but it was somewhat true, I'm guessing. So therefore, it fundamentally makes things very efficient, creates new opportunities, new disruption. See, how do you create disruption? If you think about it, one is you are a startup, you have some idea. But if you see the history of valuable startup creation, there are waves. There was an iPhone wave. In India, there was a Jio wave in 2016. That is why you see so many unicorns in India. Otherwise, I think in 2010, nobody thought there will be so many unicorns. Then year after year, there has been this digital thing. I think UPIs. Then since UPI, I don't know what has been the big wave. I think ONDC, they're riding certain waves. Or these are mini waves. So that's how, that tailwind is very important to create value. Because if you're against the wind, then it's very hard, even if you have money. So these are giving a lot of these tailwinds to India. Apart from the fact, so Jio has given everybody a phone. We have more than 50% penetration now, and we've seen in other countries, in China and others, right? When you have this kind of cutover where the bulk of the population is on the internet, and then you have these other financial sort of linkages, then you can create homegrown business models which are very innovative. Meesho did it. You have this credit on UPI. So new age companies are coming. And so there's a lot of startup value creation that is happening, will happen. not necessarily copying other models and all. And this is a digital stack is a very integral part of it, because otherwise you will have zero monetization, and then the model will fall down, basically. But I think they also have to understand that there's a large population, large part of our population is actually getting subsidies, monetary subsidies. There's a scheme, 6,000 rupees to Kisan families a year, etc., which have somewhat increased over the years. A lot of this is happening through this AEBS system, which is sort of what UPI is based on. It goes directly to the bank accounts. They can actually access their, withdraw money from small retail shops, which goes into the AEBS accounts and all that. So even people who are not necessarily in your audience, a lot of them are benefiting from this. And they don't have to go to somebody and sort of cajole them to give them the money and all that. So it is actually across the rich and the not so rich, it has actually improved their quality of life tremendously.
So rich and not so rich startup की world में इंडिया और भारत की बात होती है. I don't know how to define it. मैं बहुत लोगों से बात करता हूँ. I think it's a lot of people don't think that this notion is right, but a lot of people have this की affluent part is India and tier 2, tier 3 is Bharat. And at Jar also we get this question a lot. So what are your thoughts? Is it something separate? And a lot of people say we are looking at Bharat specific solution. Bharat के लिए बना रहा है, building for Bharat. हम भी बहुत बोलते हैं. तो क्या है ये मतलब?
So I think the terminology is slightly diffuse, but I think that I know why it has come about, because when e-commerce started, Flipkart, uske baad all this first cry, the first wave, I think predominantly they were catering to the India. Because उस समय internet English में था. Flipkart actually started on email. And then they launched the app. If you see, the mass population in India for their day-to-day need doesn't use email, right? Fundamentally. So it was derived from the sort of American way. So it's not because the population was like that, because the startup thinking, because we are copying Amazon and exactly sort of the model, the whole modeling of the workflow started like that. So that became India. Typically a urban city, maybe tier 1 city. तब तो logistics भी नहीं था, right? We had a top 5 cities, 10 cities, 15 cities. So we started catering only to these guys. But that's not because they are the only wealthy ones. But then what has happened is, obviously over the last 10 years, with the geo wave, everybody got a phone. Everybody is on social media. YouTube is the search engine of India. Instagram has probably 500 million users. WhatsApp has, 700-800 million, whatever. So this information and aspiration has become more spread out. At the same time, our distribution of goods has also become spread out. We're talking about Andaman and Northeast. And the retail infrastructure is obviously also growing, but not at the same pace. If you go to Northeast or Andaman, etc., you're not going to find so many malls and all. Because India has always been short of quality retail space compared to the US, where all the malls are shutting down. So the aspiration has spread more, distribution has spread more, wealth is there. Yes, I'm sure top 10 cities have a lot more wealth, but people have money. They also have time. So it has become much more spread out. So therefore it's diffuse. Now you can call it in other ways, the outlook, somebody is more modern, somebody is more traditional. There are still joint families in India. In the same pin code in Mumbai, you will find that India of 3 centuries, right? Who think in 3 different ways, because Mumbai will have a 100 crore flat and next to it will have a chawl and whatever, right? Yeah, it's a very different kind of city. Yes. So forget the same city, same pin code, you'll find it. So the social norms are different. So therefore, each of them is a deep market. To a nuclear family, what you can do, more traditional, to this new age, Gen Z, what you can cater. Each of them is, 100 million, 200 million people. So therefore, you can build specific offerings for them. And then you can label it India or Bharat. To me, I'm now beginning to find Bharat slightly derogatory, because it seems to imply that India is somewhat superior to Bharat. That's not the case. You see the monetization in some of these content apps and all. They're just rocketing, right? So you look at companies like Zudio and all, which are opening 30, 50 cities. I don't know what the number is. It is a destination. People go to buy. So I think it is unifying in many ways.
Speaking earlier about religious apps,
Yeah.
they have started to monetize a lot.
Correct, absolutely. And astrology, Chadhava, Puja, and they have people from tier 1, Bangalore, they moved. Traditional temple is now in Gao. They can't go there. And it's also happening in smaller towns. So that's the beauty of India. I think however modern we may be, there is a certain unifying phenotype about us, which doesn't just disappear. So you could be using a dating app and a religious app at the same time, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
You can be deeply religious and deeply flirtatious at the same time or whatever, right? So that's what it is.
तो एक टाइम था, मेरा पर्सनल हैंडल होता जब मैं घर पे बोलता था कि मैं इस कंपनी में काम करता हूँ, बाउंस पे काम करता हूँ, तो किसी को कुछ समझ नहीं आता था, क्योंकि बहुत सारे रिलेटिव सोचते थे कि इट्स नॉट अ रियल जॉब, या वो या कि उन्होंने 4 टेक कंपनीज के नाम सुने तो वही है. आई हर्ड सो मेनी स्टोरीज ऑफ माई टीम लाइक दैट. और सडनली मतलब कुछ सालों में ये चेंज हो गया है. अभी बहुत परसेप्शन चेंज हो गया है कि आप स्टार्टअप में काम कर रहे हो फ्रॉम अ सोसाइटी स्टैंड पॉइंट. तो ये आपने ऑब्जर्व किया है और आपके क्या थॉट्स हैं?
आई थिंक यूर राइट. आई थिंक लास्ट 5 years स्टार्टअप का एक तो मीडिया में बहुत कवरेज है. I think then Shark Tank and those kind of things have really changed.
You think it has helped?
Helped to the extent that startups in general have somewhat understood by like a lot of people now. And I think to some extent it is considered, kuch to hai, it's not like some sham, it's something real and positive. So I think that has helped. I'm remembering that time, I think 2010, see, what also happens is, like when the startups exit or Flipkart announced $700 million ESOP, one is also from an employee perception that changes, because one is to work and get the salaries. And I think because this bull market, they may manage to raise a lot of money and pay very high salaries, which was not the case 6-7 years ago. And then this exit things happen and all. So then people get that additional sort of confidence. But I think secularly, with the 100 unicorns, and the narratives have been there over the last 5, 6, 7 years. To more and more people understand, more and more parents understand. Though if you were to ask my son, I don't work in startups. If you were to ask my son who's 14, what does he do? He just goes to the office and orders Swiggy. So no, but I'm interested in jokes. But yeah, I think secularly, obviously, there's more and more awareness, and Shark Tank and others have probably done a lot in the last 2-3 years.
Even government, there is something called as National Startup Day also.
Yeah.
I mean, the government is talking about it.
No, I think that also helps, because I think when Modi ji is seen with startups and it comes with the press, then obviously there are a lot of followers, so they also believe ki it's good, maybe it's missionary.
There are some government funds as well. Right?
Yeah. I think the government has not done small things. They've done some pretty big things. One of them is the fund of funds. I believe something like 10,000 crores, which has a multiplier effect because it is given to other domestic VC funds to invest in startups.
Okay.
And I think that has had a big impact. So if you see in the last 5 years or so, the share of domestic managers has increased in the deals. And like I was saying before, more and more ground up disruptions and startups will come, which I think to some extent will be appreciated more by domestic people who lived and breathed in India. They are not carrying any overseas baggage. And so this will all become a more and more virtuous kind of cycle. And that's needed, because foreign money to some extent is always volatile, because they're taking a global view.
But is the West also looking at India like this in terms of...
No, over time, obviously, interest has increased. Also, this whole China plus one. But China plus one is not only India. If you see, a lot of US FDI has gone to Mexico and others also. Southeast Asia. India is definitely a part of the calculus. And that has been there. I mean, the West US VC funds landed in a serious way in India, almost 20 years ago, 2004, 5, 6, some of them started lending deeply. So that has always been the case. But I'm saying it can be volatile because, like you've seen, some of the bigger hedge funds stopped investing. So that capital has a little volatility to it. That is why the importance of domestic capital, which is wedded to the India thesis, believes in it, is not going to go away, is very important, right? Ultimately, you have to build your own base. Like you see in the Indian stock market, the percentage of equity holdings of domestic retail households and all has kept increasing over time. And that's a wonderful thing. Right? The SIPs are just growing like anything. So that is important also in the evolution of the capital markets.
Even I was reading, so what are your thoughts on brain drain? Because talent भी तो आना चाहिए ना सर यहाँ पे. कि इस, because of all of this, is it just, because you've lived in US, is it just a hoax that the brain drain is lessening now?
No, it is. So the percentage of IIT graduates, I think going overseas, like I said, in my time used to be 70%. I think it's reversed.
70%?
70%. Now it's the other way. It's probably more like 30, 40%. So many of us got this IIM admissions calls. We didn't even go. I got the IIM Bangalore interview call in my campus. I didn't go for that interview.
Because you wanted to go to the US.
I was like, kya hai?
So there is, it's not just...
It has reversed. And I think...
do you see people coming back?
I think as the parents are also getting older, it becomes very difficult for them once they are 70 plus to relocate socially, healthcare. So I see people coming back even because of that. I have to look after my parent, so I might as well do something. So yes, more and more people are coming back. But I think fundamentally, see the other thing, the other big phenomena is global capability centers. So earlier, the big banks in the US, Goldman Sachs and other companies used to give offshore work to Infosys and others or ODCs, overseas development centers. You create a captive thing for us. Over the last 15 years, they have created their own centers. They're very large, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people they have in India. And they're not doing only back-end work. They're doing middle office, some front office work for banks, a lot of deep tech work. Entire chips are being designed in India by the likes of Intel and all. So there's a lot of capability which is being acquired by these people. And that is also a very big factor, which I guess doesn't get talked about as much. So I don't think the brain drain is as much of a problem. Obviously, in niche fields like AI and all, where just started some of the new wave and the funding is a lot there, it takes a lot more to do. Then obviously the initial talent is there. But India is the largest pool of developers in the world, right? So we have a lot of talent. And I don't think, brain drain is not as serious an issue at all, in my view.
So, unrelated here, when Narayan Murthy said that youth should work 70 hours a week if we have to go anywhere close to China. So the internet, like Twitter, erupted on that, right? You have any thoughts? Because you up like Intel and all of that.
Yeah, see, I had people used to work in Hong Kong and things like that also. I don't actually see...
Maybe his context was very
different. No. But if you see, there was some article about Foxconn in India. And, they have these Apple factories and all. And I think, obviously, the wages of Indian workers are a fraction of the Chinese workers. But they are still figuring out if the Indian workers ultimately will be as productive as the Chinese. Because I think the China ethos is to work hard and achieve... It's across all strata of society, not only in the most qualified engineers and all. Even the average Chinese worker is willing to work harder and be more productive per hour because, they'll get paid more and whatever. It's not so much in India. So having that work ethic is very important for us to advance. We may have some guys from IIT, IIM, all the good colleges, toppers and all. But I'm not sure we have it at the same level as China. That is written into the culture. which also means they're very aggressive, ambitious, whatever, but that's a fact. So the quality of our manpower is to be, I think it can go up to 3 notches for sure. And therefore obviously he was a founder. If they are not worked, they will, and that time was very difficult. If you read the stories of Infosys, to import a computer used to take special permission. 1 year it took them to import a mainframe computer and things like that. Yeah, the ability to do business was so much more difficult. It's almost unimaginable. So now everything is on the platter, right? If you're an engineer, you get the food, you get whatever, but you work 4 hours a day. The reason you can get away with it is because the startups have raised so much money, they've overhired. And you thought you can find a job elsewhere, so everybody's working 4 to 6 hours a day or whatever.
Talk us about a few mistakes that you've made in your investing journey.
Mistakes?
You spoke that you...
No, I think
you're wrong most of the time.
No, you're right. I mean, there are multiple types of mistakes. One is choosing the wrong founder. Second could be not exiting in time. Third could be missing out on companies. Missing the bus. So I think the first one, choosing the wrong founder, I think we've done it a few times. And for various reasons, in hindsight, the joke I tell people, and I think maybe somebody else made this, VC is a business where you keep making the same mistake in different flavors. It is not a business where you completely stop making mistakes, but then you'll never put out. So I have a slogan under my signature: feel the fear and do it anyway, which is actually a book by a lady called Susan Jeffers. Because every time you look at a company, especially early stage, there's hardly anything to go by. Maybe only 30, 40, 50%. So you're going to have to believe. And so then it's like you're pressing the trigger of a gun, right? So there's always that fear. But if you kind of walk away from a lot, then you'll miss a lot. So yeah, choosing the wrong founder is one common thing. Sometimes I would say the time was wrong, or it's not a mistake, but you get the company attracts the wrong investors and then kind of goes in the wrong direction, and there's not much you can do about it. Sometimes you don't intervene in time. So you feel something is going wrong, but you kind of have, because a lot of times you're going to, like the founder has to go by hunch, you have to go by hunch. Because ye garbad ho raha hai. But then if you don't act in time, sometimes the other way, you confront the founder. Then sometimes they get pissed, and then the relationship becomes a challenge. So there are many nuances to the mistakes also. And of course, missing a few.
What's your favorite investment? Would you like to name one?
Favorite? I think Master Chow is an interesting one. Smallcase is an interesting one. Unbox Robotics we've done, which is doing really well. So there are many. So yeah, I think, ex ante, it's like, if you didn't like the company, why would you do it? Like you have to be in love with the company. Especially for us, we don't do a lot of deals actually for early stage fund. We don't do like 20 deals a year. We do like 5, 7, 8 deals a year. So we have to really love it. And I've told my team, if we are not convinced, then let it be. It's okay. Because there's no point ki majburi mein karna hai. Majburi is not good. Because, like we were talking about crypto or others, samajh mein nahi aa raha to mat karo, right? So I think these are all different and interesting in their own way.
Aapne Jar ka naam hai?
Jar is, but we didn't want to talk so much about Jar. I'm happy to talk about Jar. I think Jar is actually, the whole space of financialization of India is very interesting. Putting money in the mattress, to FDs, to investing in stocks, to saving in gold, to now investing in an array of new debt instruments, sustainable assets. We've done another one recently. So this whole nature of India's savings going into various assets and then building businesses on top of it is it's a decadal, multi-decade sort of transformation.
message for founders who are looking to pitch to you?
I don't have any message as such. Like I said, if your pitch is very has to be attractive, it has to be sharp. Then we're happy to speak to you. We're not trying to hide behind any walls or anything. In fact, the best deals can come from anywhere. If you see the history of venture capital, how Naspers funded Tencent, how Slack pivoted from a gaming company to a communications product. There's a lot of serendipity. So while we work on our own ideas and thesis, best deals can come from anywhere, right? Like I said, Noto came from anywhere, Master Chow, Jar, even Smallcase. So many have come from, of course, not that they came from anywhere, some of them were referred and all, but just not that we were actively looking for exactly that kind of company.
सर लास्ट चीज है, जब फंडिंग विंटर की बात करते हैं तो फिर दूसरी साइड ये बताओ कि ड्राई पाउडर बहुत है, लाइक व्हिच इज
दैट्स अ पैराडॉक्स, करेक्ट.
तो व्हाट डू यू, मतलब बहुत है ड्राई पाउडर, व्हाट इज हैपनिंग नाउ? यू मेंशन्ड इट्स अ साइक्लिकल थिंग, सो आर वी लुकिंग एट द साइकिल व्हेन वी आर गोइंग अप नाउ?
So I think dry powder has been there. I mean, you see the big funds like all the tier 1 funds have Nexus, Sequoia, etc. Upwards of 500 million to 2 billions. And some of it is freshly announced in the last 1 year. So I think to that extent, the dry powder is certainly there. I think the dry powder, what is not mentioned is the risk appetite. So if I have dry powder, I can play it in multiple ways. One is I can keep doing $2 million deals and keep busy, and when something sprouts up, then I will double down. I do 20 deals in 1 year, and then maybe 5-6 of them work, and then I will keep the round to myself, which is a fair strategy. The other is I start putting in globs of money. I write 10, 20, $30 million checks. So I think the second part is not happening as much, but my sense is off late a little bit more. Anecdotally, some more is happening. And anyway, December end is a bit slow, but I think Jan is kind of started with some more activity. The thing is, if everybody is doing $2-3 million deals, then there's a bunch up of these seed deals. But if they don't go to the Series A, then it's like a mushroom, inverted sort of atomic bomb mushroom cloud, right? So that's, I think, what has happened over the last year or so. So yes, there is dry powder. The other is what type of founder is also being funded. I think in an uncertain environment, you want to fund a certain founder who has all these stripes, you write a $5, $10, $15 million check, right? Who's had some success, comes from certain well-known company or was almost at a CXO level of a Swiggy or whatever. So those guys will get the money. Some of the other guys who are not so famous, they have to therefore shine harder. Right? That's why I'm saying the pitching and all is very important. Fundraise strategy where you plan out 6 months in advance, you make warm connects with various founders, impress them. Because you'll not get time with all the top tier VCs yourself. So you sort of build a bit of a network before that, rather than, I'm ready now, I'm pitching. So all those have to be done. But yeah, like I said, if interest rates kind of come down, then what I've seen, the switch can happen very quickly. The upward switch, like we saw in COVID, can happen in 2 weeks. Suddenly all the VCs are investing in brands. Maybe because of Mama, IPO and things like that. Yes, some of these have accelerated, but I'm saying brands have been brands for 2 years ago also they were the same brands, right? So why are they investing? So I think these mood swings can happen quickly.
Okay, sir. Or anything that you want to talk about? Aaj historic day. I was telling that we are recording on the 22nd, which is also understanding so much about India.
Yeah, I mean, I feel we are talking about Bharat and India, and like I was saying earlier, Bharat lives in India also. So you see the fervor of this thing is unimaginable. seen in my building, people are lighting diyas, wo Agni Band ka wo rangoli and all that. And so that's why I say you shouldn't draw the line ki this is India. The same India is on the dating side, is in the temple, is India, Bharat are not very distinct beyond a point. And you may have the same family. Somebody is in Bharat. The teenager is in India, right?
No, I keep saying अगर इंडिया भारत का डिवीजन है भी तो जो इंडिया वाला है वो भारत से ही आ रहा है.
करेक्ट. उसके उसमें भी वो भारत का वो फ्लेवर इज ऑलवेज देयर. बोलते हैं ना जो मिट्टी है तुम्हारे में वो जाने वाली नहीं है. स्पेशली इफ यू आर लिविंग हियर. दैट्स व्हाट आई फील. So that's the beauty of this occasion, I think.
Even in Bangalore, in my apartment, there is so much happening. Bombay में अभी हमने देखा. I mean, even in absolute this area also is so lit up right now, and what is happening. Also the young and old divide. वो भी अगर आप देखो तो it's very difficult to understand. ऐसे perception है कि young लोग नहीं. You see so many young people right now celebrating जो भी अभी processions निकल रहे हैं. An equal amount of old people also. So
I'll tell you one very interesting anecdote. Somebody wrote about this. So there is this fancy apartment complex called Magnolias in Gurgaon. So one of the most premium. So the guy who was the decorator there or whatever, somebody asked him, where is your business? He thought he's coming from weddings and all. He said, well, Guruji ka jagran karte hai na, that gives me a lot of money. Because all these guys are organizing this big sammelans and all. Who would have thought, right?
Correct.
And all these are very posh guys. Those apartments are like 40 crores each or something. So imagine. So that's the thing about India. And the thing about religion is interesting because, for example, China has no concept of religion. So there's no religious app in China. US में थोड़ी बहुत है. And it's very hard category to crack also. It's not that easy. But I mean, it's like you see...
सर आज मेरे घर में भी यूज़ होता है. अगर पूजा पे बैठते हैं तो वो ऐप है जिसके ऊपर वो भजन चलते हैं और सब होता है और बहुत अच्छे से मतलब इट इज़ वेरी वेरी नाइसली. मेरे को पहले लगा था कि क्या कॉन्सेप्ट है.
No, I found one of these companies actually. I ended up investing in them before, but I met my mother and there was some grief in the family and she kept referring to this app. And like, I don't know what she uses, right? I mean, it's not that we discussed. And like, what are you doing? I've been using it for a while. I like it. I said, I'm investing in that. Suddenly she's like, oh wow, ये तो कुछ तो ग्रहण का काम कर रहा है types.
उनकी retention rates भी बहुत.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So that's the thing. So that's why I think going back to, I think the disruptor of India will be created by Indians, backed by Indians. I believe in that, right? Because we can, having lived and breathed it, we probably have some sense of it, right? This is not written into some grand thesis. This is what you see on the ground, right?
और सर जनरेशन के बारे में आपको क्या लगता है? इज द न्यू जनरेशन स्मार्टर? बहुत सारे मेरे को कन्फ्लिक्टिंग ओपिनियंस दिखते हैं. बहुत लोग बोलते हैं कि ये जनरेशन इज गोइंग टुवर्ड्स मतलब बहुत अलग जनरेशन है और एवरी 5 years जनरेशन इज चेंजिंग. ये सोशल मीडिया जनरेशन है. बट देयर इज अदर साइड टू इट दैट दे आर मच स्मार्टर देन व्हाट द प्रीवियस जनरेशन वाज. तो हाउ डू यू व्यू दैट?
It's very funny. I think fundamentally this is बोलते हैं ना, the previous generation always thinks the next generation is a bit stupid or not as good. So I'll tell you one incident.
And like,
so there was one our internal investor meeting. This time my mother attended it because she's heard about it, but she never. So she told me after my presentation, this is the first time I've seen you talk sense, and I'm 51 years old. So obviously I've talked sense before, but imagine. तो पुरानी जनरेशन को हमें से ऐसा लगता है. सो दैट्स अ फैक्ट. आई एम मेकिंग एन एनेक्डोट बट आई बिलीव दिस. हमें भी लगता है माई किड्स आर 19 and 14 कि पता नहीं व्हेन विल दे बी रिस्पॉन्सिबल, ऐसे लल्लू से है whatever. But then when I talk, so I went to my son's PTA meeting and they're saying, oh, he knows exactly what to say when. He's so articulate, he's sociable, he pays attention in class. I'm like, have you got the wrong kid? Because his name is Arjun and there are so many Arjun, very common name, right? So I फिर से check करो. So I think the fact is what I feel is like technological change. See, technological change is a factor in economic productivity. Why did America leapfrog Europe? Because of that technological change, right? So these guys are able to use that. So to that extent, they will be smarter than us. Now, will they be more distracted and others? I think it actually doesn't matter. See, their responsibilities will be different from us. Social norms will change. To the extent that they fend for themselves, are able to, in the new norm, where you have digitally social rather than physically, whatever, they can manage. That's fine, right? And they have more opportunities to create innovation. I mean, your generation is much younger, but in my time, like you're talking about the college, 93, there was no startup. Even if you have some idea, what are you going to do? You forget about it the next day, right?
These startup basically technology se hi.
I know, but the full opportunity set. See, ideas so have been coming since mankind.
So internet ke baad hi word startup.
Exactly. Then startup, I don't know when the word startup was invented because, for example, Intel was one of the famous companies to be venture backed. Intel was founded in 1968, 55 years back, by Arthur Rock. And even before that, there was some venture capital. I don't know if they use the word startup. Maybe they did. I don't know what word. So startups have been there. Sequoia Capital was founded in 1972, if I'm not mistaken. Right? So venture ka mirror image is startup. So startups, but India में कहाँ था? Right? इंडिया में तो जब थोड़ा बहुत इंटरनेट हुआ in the late 90s, early 2000s, this Rediff and all, थोड़ा बहुत ये शुरू हुआ. And then it built from there. So I'm saying they have opportunities to explore more. At the same time, what is the paradox? They say that creativity comes from boredom. Right? Apple falling on Newton's head was not happened in 1 second, right? He was probably lying there for half the day. Because the mind is filled with so much clutter and you are reading a lot of short form things. You're not reading seminal pieces by great authors or whatever. It doesn't matter, right? It's not that they are like so dumb that they're going to hurt themselves. So how do you judge whether they are smarter or not? As long as they don't destroy the world or do something stupid, I think it's fine. If you see the American founding fathers, I think the maximum age was 25 in 1776. Because that time life expectancy was... Today's 25-year-old I think they were like... Some guys were less than 20. Some were 25. The average age was some 20. Imagine the kind of maturity they had at that age. So then we can say those guys are different. But then their life expectancy was only 40 years or something. So how do you judge?
Bob Dylan, one of the songwriters, I mean, musician, 1970s में सॉन्ग लिखा था कि अगली जनरेशन जो है वो मतलब हमारे उनकी जनरेशन ये सोच रही है कि पुरानी जनरेशन इज नॉट लेटिंग देम वर्क एंड एवरीथिंग. सेम थिंग जो आज हम बात कर रहे हैं, ही हैड रिटन इन 1970s दैट सॉन्ग कि mothers and fathers don't understand us and don't criticize what you can't understand. So we were talking that maybe every generation...
That's what I'm saying. You see the Pink Floyd song, Another Brick in the Wall. We don't need no education. Like we used to sing that, in college and all that. So that I am a rebel and I'm being stymied by the older generation is a common theme. If you have teenage children, you'll realize. I have one, you probably don't. It's very common. हम भी करते थे. Now when I look back, I probably had the same conversations with my parents. So that's fine. So I think that I won't read too much into it.
What do you think of the economic aspect of economic in the sense कि not the economic word, but spending versus saving? मतलब ये फर्क तो मुझे भी लगता है कि कहीं ना कहीं तो है. That are we spenders and not savers as this new generation compared to the previous generation?
Yeah, so that obviously there's a factor.
कि कमा भी ज़्यादा रहे.
No. पहले कोई individuals को loan नहीं देता था. Even if you had a government job, I'm talking my father's time, he retired from railways. He was class 1 officer. So because they came from a very time of huge economic stress, partition and this and that, first of all, their mindset was you have to save. Second, the loans and all were not available. And the interest rates used to be very high in those times. So it is a culmination of things. Now what has happened is loans are easily available. There's a lot more aspiration to buy goods. Instagram, e-commerce, all the ads. And if you see, India's savings rate has actually gone down in the last 10 years. I don't remember the exact numbers, but so that actually has implications for the future of our country. Because if the savings rate goes down, there's less to invest. And somewhere our whole fiscal picture in the long term will suffer, right? And of course, thanks to our digital infra, companies were giving loans for 5,000, 2,000, 10,000, which obviously in the old days not possible in the paper-based underwriting, right? I mean, equivalent amounts of money then. So it's very easy to give a 5,000, 2,000 loan just on the Aadhaar and this and that. And then you keep increasing it so that they're sort of showing their creditworthiness. So people are getting more indebted. So then what happens is if in your first job you're indebted, then how will you save money to buy a house? Right? So there are all kinds of implications for the economy. Of course, we all like to say it's bad and all but people like to, splurge, right? Why not? If you can, why not? Especially when you're young. So have money, will spend. America, that's what people do, right? They always have debt. I think there was one study which said the average American had like $400 of liquidity or something. I may be wrong, but something of that order.
But anyways, personally, last thing, is this the right time to build in India?
I mean, everything is in place, right? You have the talent, you have the digital rails, internet. You have interesting segments. We're talking about flavors of Bharat and others. And venture capital, ultimately, winter or summer, that will always be the case. So it's not कि उसे अभी winter है तो अभी मैं 5 साल कुछ नहीं करूँगा. You can start, right? I think Airbnb struggled and raised like 300K, after talking to hundreds of people. So I think the good thing in a way is because of this question, the marginal founder is not going to build. And the other thing, you can actually build non-venture backed businesses too, which nobody talks about. I think if you see a lot of the successful businesses in the world, only a small percentage actually venture backed, but they get sort of attention, right? There's so many SMEs who have created fortunes. So you do that. No, what's the problem? Opportunity keeps coming in India. So there's no problem. But you have to understand the layers of India, who has money, economy. We do have a lot of people who are sort of at the lower subsistence level, sometimes hard to build for them. So you have to have a good enough understanding of that, where you're playing and product chops and all that. And you do it. I mean, if you see even companies like Zetwork and all, I'm sure 15 years ago, people said, how can you build something like this, right? For the, ye jo mistri, jo karkhana mein, whatever, the small SMEs who are building stuff, they are so unorganized. How are you even going to match them to the big guys and all?
Animal
is another one, right? So, where, how can farmers even use an app like this? But they did, right? So, I'm saying...
उसे फास्ट टैग तो पहले बोलते थे बहुत सारा इंडिया कैसे कर लेगा फास्ट.
Yeah, imagine, and that's become a killer application. And in fact, it is such a wonderful productivity thing, because see how many millions of hours were wasted just for this, and the cost of collecting and the leakage, because then the toll company may underreport the collection. So it's a vicious thing, right? So that is solved. So I think the beauty of India is that you don't have to do something very, very technically complex at the first pass. There's a lot to organize in this country, right? Because fundamentally, only 10% of our labor is in the formal sector. Everybody is operating in an unorganized way. And we've only made some dent in that. So you can actually grab that and do something about it. It's not a very difficult problem to describe in the first instance. What has happened in the US is a lot of that thing got solved. So the problems are getting more esoteric in some sense, which is also fine, more technical. of course, ultimately you will create something sophisticated to solve it. But I'm saying, it almost feels like, isme kya hai? But you solve it, there is value. So that's the beauty of our country. Correct. Exactly. So I'm saying there are lots of such things. So you can do it. The talent is also there. पैसा तो है. I mean, winter, summer, like I say, you have to look at the longer hour. पैसा तो है. उसमें कोई tension नहीं है. So yeah, I mean, like I say, I don't like to, VCs always say, oh, it's always the right time to invest, and all those are like trite statements, which is somewhat true, but I'm saying, instead of us, pontificating to founders, jisko khujli hai, that keeda is there, you will anyway come out of the woodwork and do something. Because anyway, the venture-backed startup success probability is so low that it's better if these guys come out organically, because then their intent is much higher.
ठीक है सर. लास्ट सवाल.
बोलो.
वैल्यू ऑफ मनी क्या है आपकी लाइफ? आपने बोला आपकी फर्स्ट सैलरी आपने बताई. आज being a VC, what is the value of money in your life?
To me? Yes. No, I think it's very simple, because I want to be able to provide for my kids, for them to settle, and over time be comfortable, travel a bit, not looking for anything extravagant, but have enough. And now, obviously, people living longer and all, it's hard to predict, right, how much money you need. So you need a bit of a cushion. So that's what it is. I think to be able to live life on your terms is what money means. Not for anybody else, not to show that you have X or Y or whatever. I think I've gone past that stage. So it's more for myself.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Deepak sir, मजा आया. Hopefully आपको भी आया है.
I know, I really enjoyed. I hope this makes it to the publishing, not a cat film that never made it to the screen.